One major development going on now involves more to do with Dominique Thorne going off at the fans yet again in the midst of the Ironheart ratings disaster.
That is all ego. You would never find me with an ego like that, not with my fallopian tubes.
Comes to the numbers. Spoiler alert, kind of exactly what we expect. Ironheart ratings in the gutter.
Now, Thorne delivered the following in a desperate play to salvage the series. I think Marvel fans, she says, just need to take a step back and to stop focusing on our support for both diversity and LGBTQ and claiming that as some form of a hidden message.
Natalie AI thing seems utterly preposterous and ridiculous, and even for an MCU show, I'm finding it to be a little bit of a bridge too far to go. The Heist crew, all lame. Every single one of them, all lame.
And so in this, I'm not sure what they're meant to be, because this character isn't to be confused with Slog.
Slug, our hacker extraordinaire.
Who is also the exact opposite in the same show. I'm really confused.
Was a massive disappointment in the ratings for them, certainly. We do know, when you go and you look at through these charts, the first couple days it was out, because we have 3 days of Ironheart in these numbers, just like we had 3 days of Daredevil in these numbers. And Daredevil in those first 3 days had over 300 million minutes watched. So, and that was with less possible runtime than something like Ironheart. Yet we know that it hasn't matched that.
Now is that we know that Kevin Feige and Bob Iger, they're also engaging in damage control about this show, saying things like, don't trust the negative reviews, don't trust the trades, stuff like that.
Ironheart is the biggest L of Marvel of all time. The reactions are just spectacular. Supposedly he's smarter than Tony Stark, bites an electric wire, sells her soul to gain magic powers, uses new powers to steal. What did the writers mean by this? Smoke detector beeps.
And they were doing everything in their power to really prop up this show. That's exactly why they had RDJ, Robert Downey Jr., some weeks ago going on talk shows to really say that Riri is the best thing to the MCU to represent the legacy of Tony Stark.
I can understand why she's frustrated. That's how I feel watching her interviews.
How do you feel about the impact that she's having on young Black girls? And I'm going to be completely honest, on Black women.
You know, this is yet another area that's getting vibrant. It's getting full in the way that it should be.
Let's be real for a second. Marvel didn't just flop with Ironheart. They buried it. No trailers, no press, no premiere. A $200 million series vanished like a studio secret they hoped no one would ever find. You didn't miss the ads for Ironheart. There weren't any. You didn't miss the fan hype. There wasn't any. Marvel didn't release this series. They dumped it.
It deserves your attention. Ironheart deserves your attention. That's how I knew. I was like, oh, they are desperate to get people to watch this show. But after I did my reaction, I kept getting, hey, it wasn't that bad. I just watched it. Hey, I just watched the first 3 episodes. It wasn't that bad.
On a random Tuesday, Ironheart quietly slid onto Disney Plus with zero fanfare, no countdown, no interviews, not even a vague tweet from the official MCU account. And in an industry where studios brag about every view, every hashtag, every viral clip, this one came with silence. And you know what that silence tells us? That Ironheart wasn't just another misstep. It was a disaster so big, even Marvel was too embarrassed to promote it.
Ironheart might be one of the worst executed ideas ever in the MCU. Because under all that garbage was actually potential.
They didn't want attention. They wanted distance. But that's not the full story. Because what happened behind the scenes, from the bizarre plot decisions to the character that was supposed to replace Iron Man to the growing rumors of data manipulation, reveals something even deeper. Ironheart didn't just expose a bad show. It exposed how far Marvel has fallen.
Yeah, and it's like the real Tony Stark. It's like back somehow. And there's like a moment where she's flying through and he's like, who is that? And she's like, I'm Ironheart, Mr. Stark. And he's like, I like that girl. And then he like goes to do something else. Like that would be like the level of something that I think would possibly happen.
So let's rewind. Let's break it down. Because the story of Ironheart is more than just a flop. It's a warning. And maybe, just maybe, the moment the MCU lost its spark for good. $200 million. That's how much Disney and Marvel reportedly poured into Ironheart. And yet most fans didn't even know it came out. Let that sink in. This wasn't some low-budget experiment or surprise indie project buried under bigger releases. This was meant to be the next big character. The heir to Tony Stark. A genius young Black woman building her own iron suit from scratch. The kind of storyline Marvel should have been shouting from the rooftops. Instead, they dropped 3 episodes on a weekday with no trailers. And then, exactly 1 week later, the rest. No press tour, no fan event, no teaser countdown, not even a 30-second clip on the Marvel YouTube channel hyping it up. Why? Because deep down, Marvel knew. They'd seen the writing on the wall. They'd watched the early screenings. They'd done the re-edits, the reshoots, the internal test screenings. And when it still couldn't be saved, they made a choice. Quietly bury it and hope no one noticed.
There is also way too much focus on the LGBTQ community by the fandom in a negative manner, and it just needs to go away, I think, for a healthy story to grow, and for Riri to really share her limelight with fans.
But people did notice, and not in the way Marvel hoped. Industry insiders began calling it a stealth cancellation in disguise, a silent rollout meant to bury the series before it had a chance to fail publicly. No expectations, no headlines, no accountability, and even more telling, Marvel never once released the viewership numbers. That's not just unusual, that's unheard of. When Daredevil Born Again premiered, Disney rushed to announce 7.5 million views. When Agatha All Along landed, they touted 9.3 million. But Ironheart? Crickets. Even The Acolyte, with its mixed reviews and controversial themes, got press coverage and engagement stats. But Ironheart? It was like Marvel tried to erase it from existence. Why spend $200 million on a project, then pretend it never happened? Because they knew. They knew. This wasn't just a risk, it was a guaranteed failure, and they tried to ghost drop it into oblivion. But what made it such a failure? What went so wrong that even hate watchers didn't bother? It all starts with the character they were banking the future of the MCU on. Riri Williams was supposed to be Marvel's next big thing. A young prodigy from Chicago, brilliant enough to build her own Iron Man suit from scrap. On paper, that sounds like a modern-day Tony Stark origin, grounded, empowering, and timely. But when she finally hit the screen in Ironheart, something felt off. Riri didn't feel like a hero in progress. She felt like a product. There was no real journey, no growth, no struggle. From the moment we meet her, the show frames her as already the smartest, the bravest, the most misunderstood genius in the room, which would be fine if we got to see that growth happen. But we don't. Instead, we're told to admire her constantly. The show doesn't ask us to connect with Riri. It demands we applaud her. And that's where the disconnect starts. Because viewers don't connect to characters who are perfect from the start. We connect to their flaws, their struggles, the moments where they fall and crawl back up. Think of Tony Stark. He was a self-absorbed businessman who had to go in a cave to become Iron Man. Think of Peter Parker, overwhelmed, unsure, constantly learning. But Riri? She's portrayed as bulletproof, untouchable. Every obstacle she faces gets brushed off. Every decision she makes is framed as correct. She never doubts herself. And when she does face consequences, they're often minimized or blamed on others. That's not empowerment, that's detachment. And it gets worse. Because the show ends, and this is real, with Riri striking a deal with Mephisto. Yes, Marvel's version of the devil. Instead of a sacrifice, instead of a growth moment, she ends her arc by partnering with evil. Not in a tragic way, not as a moral lesson, but as a strategic move. Marvel tried to sell it as edgy, but it landed as tone-deaf, confused, and totally disconnected from the emotional core of the character. And here's the real problem. Riri was never built as a person. She was built as a symbol, a young black female prodigy who checks every box, but never comes to life on screen. The writing treats her like an idea, not a human being, and that's why fans couldn't connect, because no one roots for a checklist. And Marvel, they knew this character had issues, which is exactly why they started damage control before the show even aired. You'd think the lowest point of Ironheart would be its empty release, or its hollow writing. But no, Marvel managed to take it one step further, and they did it with a twist that left even fans shaking their heads. Because when all was said and done, the big finale, Riri's defining moment, was her striking a deal with a literal devil. No metaphor, no symbolism. We're talking Mephisto, Marvel's version of Satan himself. Let's pause on that. This is a character who was supposed to represent brilliance, innovation, and the future of the MCU. And she ends her arc by aligning herself with the embodiment of evil. And this wasn't some kind of tragic sacrifice either. It wasn't a moment of weakness or emotional manipulation. It was a business move, like she was closing a tech startup deal with Lucifer himself. This wasn't subversive. It wasn't clever. It was confusing, jarring, and most of all, emotionally empty. Marvel tried to frame this as bold and dark, but to fans, it felt more like desperation. A Hail Mary from a writer's room that had no idea what they were building. There was no setup, no moral weight, no internal conflict to justify this decision. It just happened, like a twist for twist's sake move you'd see in a fanfic with zero stakes. But here's where it gets deeper, because this wasn't just bad storytelling. This twist undermined everything Ironheart was supposed to stand for. What does it say about a legacy character, someone meant to follow Tony Stark, who doesn't find her strength through struggle, sacrifice, or growth, but through a shortcut deal with evil? Tony Stark built his legacy by trying to save the universe. Riri Williams? She cut a deal with the devil to stay relevant, and Marvel tried to sell this as fresh storytelling, but all it really did was expose a terrifying truth. They have no idea what kind of heroes they're building anymore. And fans felt that, because you can write diversity, you can write representation, you can write symbolism, but if you don't anchor it in humanity, in real, vulnerable, flawed storytelling, it just floats away, meaningless, weightless, which is exactly what happened here. Riri's story didn't end with triumph. It ended with confusion, contradiction, and collapse. And Marvel, they saw the storm coming, which is why they shifted into panic mode the moment this series hit streaming. The second the first 3 episodes dropped, with no buzz, no traction, and 0 critical acclaim, Marvel pulled the emergency lever. And what followed wasn't promotion, it was damage control. Let's start with the most obvious move. Robert Downey Jr. suddenly appeared on talk shows, podcasts, and press circuits, not to promote a new Iron Man project, but to sing praises about Riri Williams. He called her the future of the MCU, said she carried the legacy of Tony Stark, and tried to build a bridge between his iconic run and this brand new character most fans hadn't even heard of. It was a desperate attempt to lend credibility, a way to transfer Iron Man's legacy to a character that hadn't earned it. But audiences saw right through it. This wasn't mentorship, this was marketing. RDJ wasn't there because he believed in the story. He was there because Marvel needed a familiar face to cover for a collapsing franchise. And then came the next wave, the review scrubs. Within days of Ironheart landing on Disney+, fans noticed something strange. On Rotten Tomatoes, 1-star reviews began disappearing. Harsh comments were vanishing, filtered out. It looked like a digital cleanup job in real time. And it's not the first time Marvel or Disney's been accused of manipulating reviews, but this was blatant. Too many negative comments just gone, replaced by generic, vague positives that didn't even match the tone of the actual audience feedback on other platforms. Yet even with the scrub down, Ironheart couldn't be saved. The score still tanked. IMDb sat at 4.2 out of 10, a rating that puts it right alongside Eternals, Inhumans, and Morbius, Marvel's Mount Rushmore of misfires. And Marvel's response? Total silence. No interviews with the showrunner, no Q&A panels, no behind-the-scenes commentary, not even the usual fan interactions on Twitter or TikTok. Instead, they buried the conversation. Any backlash was written off as discriminatory. Any criticism was deflected as misunderstanding. And Dominique Thorne, the lead actress, was sent out to deliver the final PR spin. She went on record blaming the negativity on people who just aren't ready for diversity. She said fans were misreading the show's intentions, and that criticism was less about storytelling, more about hidden agendas. But here's the problem. The show didn't fail because of its representation. It failed because of its writing, its structure, its heart, or lack of it. And fans, real fans, know the difference. Marvel tried to turn legitimate criticism into a narrative about social issues, but that strategy backfired. Because even the hate watchers, the ones who usually show up just to dunk on a bad show, didn't care enough to tune in. That's how deep the disinterest went. This wasn't a backlash, it was a funeral. And as the credits rolled on the 6th and final episode, something became painfully clear. Marvel wasn't just losing fans, they were losing trust. When a show drops on Disney+, one thing usually follows almost immediately. The numbers. Viewership stats, trending charts, engagement metrics, the kind of figures that studios love to flex even when the reception is mixed. Just look at The Acolyte. Despite its divided fanbase, Disney couldn't wait to release those viewership numbers. Same with Agatha All Along. And when Daredevil Born Again landed, they were quick to blast out 7.5 million views in 3 days. But Ironheart, nothing. No stats, no trending, no press release. Just a digital silence. And in the streaming world, silence speaks volumes. It tells us exactly what Marvel doesn't want to say out loud. That Ironheart didn't just underperform, it flatlined. Industry insiders even checked the Luminate charts, the third-party measurement tool that tracks viewership across streaming services. And Ironheart didn't even register. Not top 10, not top 20, nowhere. Let's put that in perspective. You could spend $200 million on a series and expect at least some curiosity. Hate watchers, casual fans, maybe even the algorithm doing its thing. But Ironheart? It was like no one even knew it existed. It didn't trend on Twitter. It didn't spark Reddit threads. Even TikTok, the platform that can turn literal junk into trending content, stayed eerily quiet. That's not just a bad debut. That's a black hole of interest. And still, Marvel kept quiet. They didn't spin the numbers. They didn't inflate the engagement. They didn't even lie about success like studios sometimes do, because there was nothing to work with. And when Disney doesn't brag, you know something's gone horribly wrong. But they didn't stop there. Instead of admitting failure, they reached into their usual corporate toolbox and pulled out the most predictable excuse of all. With the numbers tanking and reviews spiraling, Marvel needed a narrative, and fast. So they did what they've done before when a project fails. They blamed the audience. Almost overnight, the conversation shifted from why didn't Ironheart land with fans to are fans just uncomfortable with diversity? And leading that charge, Dominique Thorne herself. In interviews, she accused critics of missing the point. She said backlash wasn't about bad writing or boring characters, it was about viewers who don't support inclusion. She framed the poor reception as a kind of coded discrimination, a symptom, not of failure, but of bias. And look, let's be clear, representation matters. Diversity on screen matters. But what Marvel tried to do here there wasn't defend diversity. It was to use it as a shield. They took a show that was poorly written, lazily structured, emotionally disconnected, and when it didn't work, they hid behind social identity. They didn't ask, did we create a compelling story? Did we earn the audience's investment? Did we give this character real depth? No. They asked, why are fans being so negative? Why aren't they supporting this vision of progress? But here's the truth. Audiences know the difference. They know when a character is built with care, and when one is built to tick boxes. They know when a story is trying to connect, and when it's trying to lecture. And that's the tragedy of Ironheart, because this could have been great. The idea of a young, brilliant black woman taking on the mantle of the Iron Legacy, that should have been powerful. But instead of giving her an arc, they gave her an agenda. Instead of struggle, they gave her a speech. Instead of heart, they gave her hashtags. Marvel didn't build a hero. They built a bullet point list and hoped people would clap. And when they didn't, well, the fans were suddenly the problem. But you know what's funny? Even the so-called haters didn't show up. There were no mass downvotes, no trending cancellation hashtags, because people weren't mad, they just didn't care. And that's far worse, because anger can be managed, it can be spun. But apathy, that's the final blow, and Marvel knew it, which is why they buried this show, scrubbed the reviews, and launched a narrative that tried to shift blame instead of owning failure. But what Ironheart really revealed wasn't just a problem with one show, it was the crack in the foundation Marvel's been building on for years. Let's drop the act for a moment, because what Ironheart exposed wasn't just a broken show, it was a broken mindset. The idea that branding can replace storytelling, that checking the right boxes can substitute for genuine character arcs, that slapping a Marvel logo on a script is enough to make people care. And here's the painful truth, it's not. Once upon a time, the MCU understood this. They knew that what made Tony Stark unforgettable wasn't his suit, it was his sacrifice. They knew that Steve Rogers wasn't compelling because he had super strength, it was because he was willing to jump on a grenade before he had it. Now, characters don't grow, they don't struggle, they just show up fully formed, say all the right things, and expect applause. And fans feel that. They feel the absence of vulnerability, the absence of consequence, the absence of soul. Because somewhere along the way, Marvel stopped building stories. They started building symbols. And that's what Riri Williams became. Not a person, not a journey, not a hero. A concept. She was designed to represent, but she wasn't allowed to fail. She wasn't allowed to question herself. She wasn't allowed to be wrong. But here's the thing. Heroes aren't built by being perfect. They're built by making mistakes, by learning, by losing, and still moving forward. And Ironheart skipped all of that. Because when storytelling takes a back seat to messaging, you don't get heroes, you get products. And audiences don't connect with products. They don't cheer for them. They don't fight for them. They forget them, which is exactly what happened here. Marvel wanted Riri to carry the torch. Instead, they handed her a hollow script, a disconnected arc, and a finale that felt more like a bad joke than a heroic turning point. And then they acted shocked when nobody showed up. But it's not because people are afraid of change. It's because people are tired of being told that criticism equals hate. The truth is, Ironheart didn't fail because fans are bad. It failed because the writing was lazy. The characters were flat and the stakes were non-existent. The formula is broken. The audience has figured it out. And the worst part, Marvel has no idea how to fix it. So where does that leave us? 6 episodes, $200 million, years of delays, rewrites, PR spin, a stealth release strategy, a forced legacy, a forgotten finale. And now, nothing. No renewal announcement, no behind-the-scenes celebration, no making of Ironheart featurette, not even a vague stay tuned from Marvel's social media team, just silence. And in today's media landscape, silence is the one thing a franchise can't afford. Because silence doesn't just mean disappointment, it means disinterest, and that's the life sentence for any cinematic universe. Let's not pretend Ironheart was misunderstood. Let's not pretend it was ahead of its time. Let's not pretend that some wave of fan demand is going to bring it back. It's done, buried, forgotten. The most expensive Marvel project that no one watched, the character they crowned as Iron Man's successor, with no audience left to follow her. And maybe that's what hurts the most, because Ironheart wasn't just a flop, it was a warning. A warning that fans are waking up, that the hype machine doesn't work anymore, that no amount of legacy name-dropping can cover up the cracks. Marvel thought the logo was enough, that the formula still had juice, that people would show up out of habit, but they didn't, because the trust is broken. And in a post-Endgame world, that trust is everything. So when you see Marvel pretending that Ironheart's future depends on fan support, just remember this: there was no support, there was no buzz, there was no conversation, there was no heart, and you can't rebuild a universe on silence. Ironheart didn't crash because people feared diversity. It crashed because Marvel forgot the one thing that made the MCU unstoppable: good stories. And unless they rediscover that fast, this won't be the last series to vanish in the dark, because fans aren't asking for perfect, they're asking for real. And if Marvel can't deliver that, then the next big flop is already loading. Thanks for watching. If you want more honest, unfiltered breakdowns of what's going wrong in Hollywood, hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle up, because this ride's just getting started.